folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic, here with the premiere of Season 2 of Let's Do a Brew. This is where I join other content creators and personalities from the Magic community to talk about EDH, deck building, and to, of course, do a brew. Our guests on the first episode of Season 2 of Let's Do a Brew are Martin and Alex from Affinity for Commander. Alex, Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
So everybody might know you from your channel, Affinity for Commander. Fantastic gameplay channel, and you're expanding into some other videos lately as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your channel?
Yeah, so we started about 3 years ago now, is it?
Yeah, it was about 3 years.
Crazy how fast that's gone by. And we have gameplay videos, like you said, on 1 week, and then we'll have a non-gameplay video the week after. So that could be a deck tech or a lore video or a top 10 list. Yeah. And we alternate between the two. And it's quite handy having two of us here because one of us can focus on one side and one on the other. So makes it easier for us.
Exactly. We essentially have 2 weeks to do a video rather than just the 1 week each time, which is very helpful when we have other full-time jobs.
Yeah, well, absolutely. As somebody who has a new startup channel doing 2 videos a week,
there's a lot of work.
Time can get a little taxed, that's for sure. Yeah. So you've been going for nearly 3 years now. That is incredible. How many games is that up on the channel?
50.
Well, this is the 60th video that went up the other day, but that's not counting like random bits and pieces. That's like 60th just normal gameplay. Yeah. So it's going to be about 65, 70 at this point.
Or planes chase and Arch Enemy and stuff like that. So quite a few.
No kidding. So that must give you an amazing sample size in terms of breadth of experience in Commander.
Well, we were featured on that Command Zone.
That little show that you might have heard of. Commander.
Yeah, that was the one that some people may have heard of. It's quite small, quite niche, that Command Zone.
It's bizarre because we didn't know we were going to be used like the stance on it. So one of our friends just sent us a message saying, "What are you doing on the Command Zone?" And we were like, "Oh, we are."
Yeah, that's definitely a shock to the system, but still, it must be flattering to know that when somebody dives into the rarity of stats for Commander, that your channel is a go-to because of the amount of videos that you have up and the amount of varying experience that you show on the show.
Oh,
yeah, it's really weird, but it's really good. It's like a nice feeling.
Well, even like the videos we put up now, we watch our old videos and we just try not to cringe out of our own spines. But it's just little lessons we learn, like the turn counters, having the lovely border that we've altered a dozen or so times.
Yeah, it's all about growing and making it better a little bit at a time. And you don't really see it as you're going along, but when you look back at it, you can see the difference. And it's really nice to see.
Absolutely. And when you've got 3 years of experience, you go through a lot of evolution. You recently did a rebrand on the channel too, right?
Yeah, we did. Brand new logo, new playmats of patrons and all that, which was very nice because the original logo was the one I drew on my laptop, which stayed around a little too long for my liking.
I love the Dark Steel Citadel theme that kind of runs through everything, harkens back to Affinity, the modern deck, right?
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, and that's perfect. I love the new clean logo. We had a little discussion about that. Very, very slick.
Thank you very much. Which I will say, the credit for the name is entirely Martin's. He came up with the name.
Fantastic. Well, it's definitely stuck, and it's definitely stuck around. You've cultivated quite a following for yourselves. Does that ever come as a shock?
Yeah, like when we go to GPs, I'm not sure what it's like in like America.
Magic Fest.
Magic Fest, I'm sorry, but I was GPs at the time.
It was, yeah.
Like when we go there and people recognize us, it's such a weird feeling. Like just to have people go, "Oh, it's you guys from the YouTube channel." Like,
the weirdest one that I keep getting is people running up to me and saying, "Oh my God, you actually sound like that. Your voice is that deep." Oh yes, this is what I sound like. Yes, thank you.
It's a very nice community. It's like very nice people.
Very positive.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. I know a lot of places have like toxic groups and stuff, but we've never actually come across any of that in person. And very little of it online.
I've often said, when we get our first proper hate comment, I'm going to frame it and put it on our set.
Right? It's a rite of passage for anybody.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? But the fact that you've gone 3 years without getting anything like that, I mean, it's a testament to the great work that you do and the great videos that you put out. And again, this community, that there's no ill will ever, which is strange in an online community.
Yeah, definitely
true. Yeah.
Right. You've played a lot of decks on your channel. You've played against a lot of decks on your channel. You must have some personal favorites from the span of years.
Yeah. Well, we've got different play styles. Alex is more of he tries to make things very optimal, very slick, very powerful and strong, and he waits for the opportune moments. Whereas I'm the opposite kind of player, where I go, this is really silly, or this is really like unique and odd and breaks the rules a little bit, and I just go, scary big things wrong.
I will 100% do that. I think that's massively shown by the fact that you are more than willing and unironically play guild gates for fixing, and I will scoff and say, that's not a verdant catacombs. Get out.
Right. Well, it's really interesting because not only on the channel, but in your household, the two of you as a couple have that dichotomy between you. And that must be very interesting when it comes to playing as many games together as you do.
Yeah.
Well, we got engaged for how many?
I don't even want to think about how long ago that was. Now it's just time is catching up with us.
Yeah, we got engaged for I think a year and a bit ago. But since then, like we know a few couples that do share everything, every deck, every card. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'm a little bit reluctant to share because Alex invests more monetarily into the game than I do, as you can tell by the Guild Gates plans thing we said earlier.
Right.
I just feel a little bit uncomfortable with the investment side or the money side of it. Feel like I'm leeching off them a bit. But that's just me being weird. I'm quite fixated. It's just my little thing, like gold with the ring. Like it's mine.
It's your precious.
But yeah, like I'd say, like if I went to borrow something, like, hey Alex, can I borrow your Prince of Behemoth for this? It's like, yeah, sure, here you go. You're stopping around, so we're quite good with that. But
exactly, and we'll still play each other's decks if you like that. And they're still all there, as you can see in our videos. Like there are, what did we count? 39 ultimate guard boulders right there.
And we do some decks that kind of like were originally both our deck that's been made, and then one of us has gone, I want to change this a bit and like alter this. So none of them are true like neutral decks. But I think that's good because we have different flavors to it. Like I like like the silly things, I also like the powerful things, and you get quite a nice balance.
Yeah, and being able to share decks and swap decks gives you a taste of each other's styles and play styles too, and deck building styles. And we know that things are diverse. No two people will build the same deck the exact same way. And the two of you being able to bounce off of each other like that must really be a benefit, especially if one of you is doing a brew and wants input from the other one. It must be easy enough to get that kind of perspective.
Yeah, we did this week. I was tuning up my Enola deck. I played it, and I can't play control. Okay, I like to kill things. I don't like to counter them, and it didn't work. I never know when to stop someone doing stuff. I just know that if it's big and scary, just get rid of it. So I put it all out on the table and said, Alex, you as the control player of the pair, come and look at it, see what you think.
Well, I think that's a start, like different style of deck building. Like you will get your Microsoft Excel spreadsheet out, go 1 drop, 2 drop, and you'll make a perfect curve and say, right, these are the cards. Whereas I will literally take a deck and I will strip it down to about 10 cards. And that's it, just 10 cards. I'll say, these are the cards that I want to play. These are the base theme of how the deck wins the game. And then everything else gets built around those 10 cards and how to optimize that particular brand of the deck, whether that's tribal or particular interactions that I want to work with.
And like I said, I'm the opposite. I go, well, this is dinosaur tribe. Here's a pile of dinosaurs. Like some people get down to the minimum amount we do.
That's the. I think I would make if you're on like I would make a legacy deck. You play sealed.
I mean, yeah,
that's how that works.
That's an interesting, or like a block constructive.
Goes in the pile.
And that's interesting because if the two of you do sit down at the same table, then almost immediately there's a power disparity at the table. How do you handle that kind of conversation?
Well, we often, this is why you say, we discuss different things about whether certain cards should be in decks and whether they shouldn't. And it's quite interesting to hear what someone else has to say about it. Like usually they can pick up on things you weren't even thinking about, like certain cards. They can look at a different perspective and say, well, this could be used in this scenario instead of what you're saying. And it's really handy in that way. It does make it really hard for me to decide, well, I wasn't going to put this in, but now you've kind of convinced me. Now I just find another thing to take out to mix it around.
Or even like just generic things that you have a fresh set of eyes for. Like when I was making my 5-color mutate deck, and Martin comes in and goes, you know, mutate doesn't work on humans.
And his commander's King Kenrith, so
little things like that.
It's interesting because while you're deck building, you can talk about that power disparity, but there's also the conversation when you sit down at a table with other people. Because if Alex, you're playing something that's a 7, and Martin, you're playing something that's a 5, do you sit down at a table and say, play a 6? Or...
Well, yeah, but to be honest, when we sit down at a table, the usual kind of atmosphere of people who know us is Alex sits there doing nothing and then does really scary things. And
I've learned that myself recently.
Yeah, it becomes 3-on-1, and they kind of accept that and just we start the game 3-on-1. But then they look at me and go, well, Martin's not really doing anything. But once everyone's piled the resources into Alex, I tend to come out of nowhere and go, and now I win instead. So, yeah, I think the people who know us, they know how to stop us.
I'd say if we were in a different play group, we have, again, like 38 decks-ish. There are decks that I have that are not fully optimized as much as I like.
Yeah.
Like, I have a Derevi deck that's just tribal flyers.
Yeah.
But it's just a funny little thing that if someone says, oh, I just want to play this, it's like, oh, I'll take out tribal flyers.
Yeah.
It's a bit of fun. I think if I had literally nothing but 7 upwards decks, I'd find the game very boring.
And we found that it's one of the GPs he went to, when we sat down for some, it was like the competitive Commander games, but it was still quite casual, which was nice.
Yeah.
And everyone sat down and went, well, how are we playing this? Because there's no prize pool, in the end, everyone gets an even split. And I was like, well, what level are we going for?
Yeah.
And that was really handy, just to be able to say, well, should we have a nice slow roll game or a more powerful game?
Yeah.
And just having everything that fits in between is really handy, especially with my newer players, for example. You don't want to scare them off by bringing out the big boys and beating them to a pulp.
Well, that's why Commander's probably, like, why I always said Commander's the best format. Because, well, you can never convince your opponent not to kill you in Modern. And also, the fact that you can sit down and say, what type of game do you want to have? Because you're there primarily for the fun, and the winning does come in a bit of second, I think.
Yeah, and if you're like too strong, it does become 3-on-1, so you've got to balance it out so you're not the big threat.
Exactly. And that is the big benefit of our community, is that this isn't just a game where you sit down cold, shake hands, and you try and kill each other. This is a format. This is a game where you're able to sit down and have a conversation before you ever get into the game. And that's rare for just about any other game or format out there. This is an interesting conversation that Shivam and I had a couple of weeks back when he was here on the show about sitting down with new players or sitting down with deck power level disparities and what disparages new players, what scares them away and has them never return, and how to cultivate a friendlier format and a friendlier environment. And that all starts with the conversation and ensuring that everybody knows what the expectations are.
Well, this is something we were talking about with Alison, the fact that every time you are playing a game, you're not playing one game, you're playing a series of games for the future. There was a friend of mine who, years ago now, but she came to an F&M, had a game, and the person was just, as you say, cold, just wants to kill the other person. And she confided in me months later that if I hadn't been there, she just would have left. And I was like, well, I'm glad that I was there, because she's very much into Magic and loves it.
Yeah,
I'm like, good.
Everyone can have a bad game or a bad experience, but it's having the overall enjoyment of it that makes you want to come back.
Yeah.
So even if like you lose to an infinite combo that's fairly boring combo to lose to, you can still have fun in the environments, which is harder when it's 1v1 and you're just being constantly beaten down.
Yeah, there's a difference between losing to an infinite combo on turn 2 or 3, where you've done nothing but play tap lands, and then there's a difference of losing to an infinite combo on turn 12, when everybody's played out their battle cruiser and gone through 3/4 of their deck and had a good time.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Yep.
There's the difference of, if you say, I want to sit down and play 17 games of CDH in the next hour, that's totally fine.
As long as everybody at the table is on the same page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not playing games. I'm playing Uno, you're playing Monopoly. It's not the same thing.
That's a really random way. So I would have said playing solitaire, but sure.
Well, better.
Absolutely. So with that, you've played tons of decks. You've got plenty. We can see some of them in the back there. Now, you definitely have some personal favorites from amongst that collection. Is there any that if somebody says pull out your favorite deck, you can immediately go to?
Ooh, I've got a tribal druids deck, which is led by Seton Croson Protector, who's green. I love him because it's just druids, right? They're not that scary, but then he taps them for mana. He doesn't give them the ability to tap for mana, so they don't have to worry about summoning sickness. And it's just druid into a druid into a druid, and it's one of those where it can be pretty low power level, but you can make it go like longer and stronger, and then you just need to finish it off by pumping them all and swinging. So it's one of those where you can play it nice and friendly, or if you need to, you can start getting like crazy and making the druids really hench and killing people. And it's just fun. It's really random and tribe that shouldn't really work together like that.
Yeah, it's the druid version of an elf ball deck.
Yeah.
Let me just point out, you stole all of my lands on turn 3.
So there's a druid that says tap 5 druids, steal all of opponent's lands, and then you have other cards that like untap all your creatures. So you go, in your upkeep, those lands are mine. Next player, in your upkeep, those lands are mine. So it has that really mean streak. Everyone just hates you.
Oh, that is nasty. And that's one of those games where you're like, okay, respect. That's a neat combo. You can have my lands. Let's shuffle up and move to the next.
Let's open the next. My favorite. See, I would say my favorite deck. I am very fickle. I would say my deck favorite currently is the one that I haven't been able to play due to quarantine. That's Paco and Haldon, the new doggo and human commanded steel stuff. But it's one of my favorite just because I haven't been able to play it, and it's sat there mocking me.
Yeah, like, you can't play it over webcam because you can't take someone's cards through the screen and pull them.
Absolutely. And Paco and Haldon and a lot of the commanders that steal stuff like Gonti, Lord of Luxury, in this environment when everybody's playing Magic via webcam, they are really the ones that suffer. You stop seeing those, and you've got to feel bad for the people that have built those decks, and those decks are their pride and joys, and now they can't play them. And on your channel, you've shifted to playing webcam Magic as well, like many others have. Are there any other fallout or side effect that you see from moving to this webcam style?
I think it's the actual software spell table is fantastic. It tracks all your bits and pieces like your life and your commander damage. That's made life easier for me because human error means that I could miss taking off some life or count wrong. And then it's like, whoops, I should have been dead there, but I wasn't. Oh well. So that's kind of a positive to it. But it's harder to have like the banter and like the connection with someone if you're not there through a screen. So it has ups and downs. But another upside as well, which I think is fantastic, is we can play games with yourself and people in Canada and people like all over the world.
People like Canada?
People in Canada.
Okay.
Like Andrew, I'm taking months. Had some games with him. There's like so much ocean separating us that we'd never been able to see him in person. So it's really cool that you can do that. And I know that a lot of people have made like Discords and Reddits where you can meet people to play. And it's just quite a nice little resourceful community, like saying, well, we can't go and play our game, but we're going to bring the game here instead. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's really nice.
Which I think is a lovely thing. But actually, like, beyond certain stealing cards, I do think it sort of does ruin the gathering of Magic the Gathering a bit.
Magic the social distancing.
Magic the social distancing doesn't quite roll off the tongue, which is also, I think, a bit of an issue. Like, I don't see Commander as a format really growing at this point because you can't go into a local shop, see people playing it, get invested in it. I do think the people that are using Fae-Table like we are, I think are a lot more established players. I can't imagine Commander growing massively at the moment, which is a shame.
New players being attracted to the format when there's this barrier to entry. You can't sit down on your LGS, crack open a precon and play with somebody anymore. There's tech restrictions. You need to find a community.
Like, how many times did we have people, especially kids, who would come in and say, "Oh, Alex Gray," it's like, well, here's 4 different spare decks I brought. Choose one.
Yeah, that was really rewarding, having someone come in, or if they just got, like you say, that pre-planned deck and sitting down and going, "I really want to play this," and just going, "Okay, so this is what your commander does, and this is what that word means, and you want to kind of go this direction playing, but do whatever you want." It's like just kind of being like the angel or devil on their shoulder, kind of telling them how their deck works as they're going, and just seeing them putting it together and learning and picking up that's really nice to do, which you can't do over webcam as easily. Trying to do other games like Dungeons and Dragons over webcam has the same ability, and I've got a new group where they've never played before, and trying to explain certain things to them over webcam rather than just in person when I can show them, it's a challenge. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and there's 2 things that I feel have really disconnected from this. The first is the collaborative aspect of Commander as a format. One of the big benefits is being able to sit down and say, "Oh, I want to add in this new card. What should I take out?" And being able to just hand your deck over to somebody and have them rifle through it. Yeah. One of the reasons why I started this channel is because I would normally sit at my LGS and have people bring me their decks and say, "What would you change? What would you do?" Or we'd be finished a game and they'd say, "Oh, this card really didn't perform for me. What should I replace it with?" And the first time that I had somebody that I used to do that with reach out to me digitally, and I made like a quick little video like this for him going through his deck with him, I was like, well, maybe there's some possibility.
This.
Great. Like you say, it's a similar kind of thing that just made me think of is that our local game store has a lot of judges. We've got, like, for some reason, our city has like every other person for judges. It's so bizarre. But that's the thing of you saying playing a game, especially Commander, where you have cards from all over time and the game, like saying things that should never see each other interacting and making weird rules changes. To be able to go, "Judge, what's going on here?" And I'm coming over and figuring out what to happen. You can't do that on a webcam game. You just got to kind of hope for the best. Again, it's like there's more than just the 4 people in a game. You've got the entire
you've got people observing and watching, and you've got people that will stand behind you and look at your hand and be like, I do that. The backseat players, and with this format, when you record a gameplay and you upload it, you get that same kind of thing, but it takes away that human element, which I really think is the second thing missing from this whole format where we are doing webcam magic, and that is that you don't get to look someone in the eye when you're playing anymore. We had the analogy, Jim from the Spike Feeders, he equated it with playing professional poker, where you're able to read someone and you're able to take a look at their expressions or their body language, and you're able to make assumptions and guesses based on what they want to do or what they can do. And that's missing when you don't have that in-person aspect.
That's it, especially if they've got 2 blue mana open. You can't see their face or they're flicking their cards going, like you say, it's a completely different way of playing.
That bead of sweat dripping down their forehead.
It's like when they scry, are they utterly disgusted or super happy with that card? You just don't know.
Right. Yeah, you only get so much on webcam magic through hand gestures and the way that people are moving their cards around. You don't get to look somebody in the eye when they draw that card and you see their eyes light up anymore. So
their left pinky twitched a bit. They've just drawn a creature.
But still, there is that aspect of being able to read someone at the table when you're playing in person that is removed from this. But I think that a lot of people, I would hesitate to say ourselves included, are just grateful that we get to play Magic at all during this.
That is the thing. Like, we've had people who said, "Oh, I haven't played the game." What was It was Angela, wasn't it, who said you hadn't played a game of Commander for so long until Spell Table came along. And it's like, that is both terribly sad and also great to hear.
Yeah. The fact that the technology allows us to connect and play Magic with anybody around the world now is a leap that was well needed, because I think most people have shown up to their LGS on open Commander night and there's been full pods. Right? You've got 3 or 4 full pods of people. So you're sitting there doing nothing, shuffling your deck, waiting for a spot to open up. You can find any number of open pods at any number of power levels here online now.
Yes.
Very true. Yeah.
There's no shortage of games to be played.
No, absolutely not.
Great. So the other thing that we want to do here on Let's Do a Brew is exactly that. And we want to do a brew. And in a little bit of a twist on our format here in our second season, rather than do a brew on a new deck, Martin, you are bringing an existing deck to us today, helmed by Korvold, Fae-Cursed King.
He's grabbing right there.
Oh, yes, he is. In this box. There we go. Mr. Corvold. Oh, God. There's awful. There you go. Basically, we played him the other day with yourself, and certain things worked quite nicely, and certain things just felt a bit lackluster. So I think it's time that we get your expertise to fix him up a bit, make him better, make it a bit more consistent, and see where we can go with him. It'd be interesting to see someone else's view on it, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah, and I was able to see quite a bit of it when we played too. But one of the things that I like to do when I talk about an existing deck with somebody, especially the pilot, is talk about what you feel the deck does best and what you feel its major deficiencies are. And Alex, as somebody who's played against the deck pretty regularly, your opinion is incredibly valid here too.
Well, I have one card that I'll wait till the end to always suggest to put in.
All right. So Martin, what do you feel that currently your Corvold deck does well? And for everybody's reference, I'm going to have the existing deck list in the description below.
Yep. So to me, my Corvold deck's kind of ideas are threefold. So the first thing is sacrificing things, because when you sacrifice something, he gets bigger and you draw cards. So having a good sacrifice outlets is important. Having things to sacrifice is another important thing. And then the final part would be drawing the cards and having things to play to sacrifice and to make it. So just kind of repeating that cycle up and down. There is currently a slight theme for pingers in there as well. So whenever something dies, do something, like everyone takes a damage or whatever something dies.
The aristocrats style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's in there as a sub theme, but I'm not sure how well they get together currently. So that's possibly something that could be taken out or could be fixed. I think it just needs something doing to it to make it meld just a little bit better.
Okay. And Alex, you have an opinion on the deck right now. Again, fire away. You've seen it in play more than enough.
The deck is lovely, and Corvold as a commander.
It's called getting lovely, like thoughts.
What about that new person in the office? Oh, they're lovely. No, there are definitely improvements to make. So I do think I would lean very heavily on Corvold himself as a commander, with that sacrifice and draw outlet. Because, as you know, as a player, I like drawing cards. So the ability to play, as I say, play Verdant Catacombs. I'll draw a card, crack a land. I'll also sack my commander sphere to draw 2 cards. That seems what I would be doing, which leans into that, which gives it a bit slightly more Voltron ideas as well, because it can just obviously fly over and clock someone with 21 damage.
So additional value to your stacks.
Exactly.
Sacrificing is usually a downside. If you can get value off it as well, that makes it worth it, the sacrifice, or better than the sacrifice, and that's always a bonus.
Absolutely. And Corvold is an insane value engine. When he enters the battlefield or attacks, you have to sacrifice something. Note that it's not optional, but you do get to draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on him. So you cast him and you immediately get some recouped value from that, which is a big benefit. So you can potentially be drawing 2 cards the turn he comes into play on the the enters the battlefield and on the attacks if you're able to give him haste, for instance. And then every other turn when he attacks, you get to do that. But if you sacrifice for any other reason, you get to draw cards and you get to make Corvold bigger. So you really want that fodder. And if you are playing into the aristocrat style, then maybe not the enablers that deal damage when you sacrifice something, but the enablers that give you another permanent to sacrifice when something dies. I'm thinking the Pawn of Ulamogs or the Piteous Plunderers.
That's it,
Because then you can just sacrifice them all. Because even if we're not sacrificing the Eldrazi spawns for Corvold's triggers, sacrifice them for mana. Corvold doesn't care what they're used for as long as they're sacrificed.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And the Eldrazi spawn and the Eldrazi scion are great ways to ensure that you can also keep casting Corvold if he's ever dealt with. Because with the new commander change that dies triggers are affected by commanders dying now, you can get all of those synergies and recoup the mana to cast Corvold again if he dies himself.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that because that's such a recent change. I think that's what part of the issue is that I can't keep everything up to date with new things with the amount of decks I've got. So that kind of rule change makes a big difference to it. You can sacrifice him to himself and then use it to bring him balance. That's really handy.
So because of the sacrifice theme or the sacrifice synergies with Corvold, that means that you want to be including some very specific cards that do specific things. Like you wouldn't be running a Rampant Growth in a deck like this. You would rather be running a Sakura Tribe Elder because it does the same thing. Or a Harrow, exactly, or a crop rotation.
That's it,
Those you get additional value from with Corvold out. They suddenly turn any spell with a sacrifice as a cost to it into value. Something like a Bone Splinters, which is a 1 mana removal spell that makes you sacrifice a creature, suddenly turns into 1 mana, destroy a creature, draw a card, sacrifice a creature, right? That is just value on top of value on top of value.
Yeah, spells to replace themselves as you use them. It's a fantastic way of drawing more cards whilst getting other value off it. So yeah, that's another route. That's a route that this deck kind of misses, as it doesn't have much creature destruction and things like that. There's quite a lot of artifacts and enchantment removal at the moment with things like Flashing Grantodon and Seal the Primordium, which are literally come into play, sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or enchantment, but also because of Korvold, draw it back and replace the card you play in. So things like you say, Bone Splinters and other cards that say sacrifice a creature, blow up a creature, would be great additions to it.
But then in the same light, if we're constantly sacrificing everything and getting some value off that, we don't need removal spells. If you've got something like Grave Pact, Dictate of Erebos,
Butcher of Malakir.
I knew there was a third one, Butcher of Malakir.
There are enchantments like Attrition as well, which make you sacrifice a creature to destroy a creature, and suddenly that enchantment doesn't cost you a card. You're destroying a creature, sacrificing a creature, which could be a token, and drawing a card. That's a ton of value as well, and gives you the ability to do some amazing spot removal. With enough synergies, you're able to lock out other people's board states with something like a Grave Pact and an Attrition. You're destroying a creature and then making everybody sacrifice a creature. At that point, you're making it impossible for somebody to stick their commander on the table.
Yeah, he wouldn't possibly do that.
Well, that's kind of like some of the games we've had before, where we've had out, say, Ashna's Altar and Grave Pact, means that if you play something that I don't like, I have the option to instant speed sacrifice to make you get rid of it as well. So they're always handy. And then you've got the other kind of sacrifice outlets like Viscera Seer and Woestrider, which let you scry off it as well. So if you have that sacrifice outlet instant speed, I found that that's quite a handy thing to have. Just having it as a threat on the table so your opponents don't want to play big scary things. They want to be a bit more conservative about it.
That impact of I can do this is something I think a lot of people underestimate in Commander. Like, it artificially affects the game so much that it's not a case of oh, you can't play a commander, I have to waste a thing. People won't play their commander, so you don't even have to use a resource. You're essentially like bluffing them.
And it draws out the removal as well. If you've got your commander art and Grave Pact, people will get rid of the Grave Pact over your commander, giving him a little bit of protection on the side as well.
Yeah. There's always a bigger threat, right? Yeah. So apart from that, what do you feel is non-performing in the deck right now? Is there anything that's in it right now that you've been underwhelmed with?
It would have to be the pinger side of it. I was thinking that would be a good way to close the game when you've got a big army and you can just go sacrifice. Everyone takes a lot of damage. But I don't think in a 4-player game where everyone's got 40 life, it really has the impact I need it to.
The issue with pingers is that whilst they are great, you very much need them to loop.
Yeah.
Doing them constantly is not as effective. Like, the Gavian Nest Tender deck that's cycling, that very much needs to be cycling constantly. It can't just be I'll cycle 3 times. It can't be I'll sack 3 things, because that's not enough.
I think the issue is you need to have multiple of them out for them to do any sort of real damage that's impactful. And people kind of notice, if he sacrifices a creature, I take 3 damage per creature sacrifice, so I'd rather not have that. And it's hard to get the setup for that situation.
Yeah, so you need to establish a pretty wide board state in order to get those kind of synergies going. And in a game of Commander, it's often pretty difficult to get a board state like that before somebody resets it, before somebody sets you back to 0. And with a Commander that costs 5 and then 7 and then 9, every time your board is wiped, you're back a little bit further, especially if you've been forced to sacrifice a land to Corvold's Enter the Battlefield ability. I know that you did that in our game once or twice, and that ends up setting you back pretty far despite putting a card in your hand.
That's the only thing as well with Corvold. Like, thinking about other junk commanders like Prosh, they don't have, to my mind, other than looping sacrifice effects and then giving Corvold haste, they don't have any immediate I win the game right now that involves Corvold.
Yeah, and it does bring as well the issue that I've had in the past is that Corvold comes out and his ability goes on the stack for you to sacrifice something. If someone kills him, you still have to sacrifice something but get no value from it. And I've had in the past where every time I bring him out, he dies on the spot, and I'm just making things worse for myself by playing him.
I don't know who would do that.
So maybe like some sort of protection for him or some tricks for it might be handy as well.
So that immediately, to my semi-encyclopedic knowledge here, brings up 2 possibilities. One is asceticism, which is an enchantment that gives all of your creatures Shroud.
And you can regenerate as well.
And lets you regenerate, exactly. So if you drop something like a Blasphemous Act, you can still keep around many of your creatures, which is handy. And then the other one is a little less known one out of Onslaught called Steely Resolve.
Oh, yes, I do know that one. It gives all your creatures Shroud. I had it in my Geshaft Dinosaur deck, but then I had to take it out because I couldn't target my dinosaurs or anything. So
it enters the battlefield, you name a creature type, and it gives all creatures of that type Shroud.
So you could pick something like Noble or something bizarre because he's a dragon Noble, and then it wouldn't affect many of the other creatures.
What mana cost is that?
It's like 3 mana, I believe.
Yeah, it's not a lot. It's quite cheap. Monetarily, it's rather expensive, but mana-wise, it's pretty good.
Yes. The note on it is there is a cycle of those from Onslaught. There's a rare cycle that's name a creature type, do X to all of that creature type. It is symmetrical, so it does affect your opponent. So if you name something like Dragon, it does make all of your opponent's dragons.
That was the worst thing when one of our opponents was playing. It was the dragon that takes control of all dragons when it comes into play. And I just kind of had to give him my huge commander, and I'm really not happy about it.
Oh, absolutely. That actually raises an interesting issue with Corvold too. He gets really big, and he's often his own win con just by swinging across with a big enough Corvold. But there are instances where you just can't get through. You just can't get that damage through, and that's no doubt where the aristocrats line came from. If you can't attack with Corvold, you want to start damaging and pressuring life totals through the pingers, through the aristocrats lines. What if we do something to get value out of Corvold the bigger he gets? Because no doubt, he comes down as a 4/4 that becomes a 5/5 when you sacrifice something. And then the next turn, or that same turn, you can make him a 6/6, a 7/7, an 8/8. If it doesn't make it back around to your turn to attack, why not do something like fling Corvold?
That would be so funny to watch. Like, I'm just going to make a huge dragon and just throw him at you.
Well, not only that, but you can fling a non-Corvold creature because the additional cost to play fling is to sacrifice a creature.
Yeah. So it makes it bigger unless you draw a card back up. Yeah.
Right?
So you have some big creatures in there.
So again, I saw you, I think in our game you played Prosh as mentioned. Pretty decent to be able to sacrifice all of those kobolds to Prosh, draw a mitt full of cards, attack with Prosh, deal some damage, and then fling him away. Right? Those kind of synergies, even if you were flinging something small to get the little bit of reach you need to take somebody from 3 or 4 life down to 0, again, that draws you a card if Corvold's out. It's those little sacrifice synergies that get you just a little bit closer to the finish line.
Yeah, and like even if it's only say 3 or 4 damage, that's kind of standard for 2 mana anyway. So being able to draw a card back up, you'll kind of like that's not standard for 2 mana.
No, it's fine. I was thinking something
but like so like it's like a bad bolt really, isn't it? But if you get to draw a card as well, it makes it more worth it.
Hey, I would play a lightning bolt that draws me a card for an extra mana. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Breaking him on there.
So I think one of the other things that we touched on just briefly is the benefit of things like your mana base and your mana accelerants in a deck like this. Because if you're playing things like fetches in this deck, even the pseudo fetches like Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse, those are lands that are drawing you cards.
Yeah,
exactly. Imagine just having Corvold out. Play a land, sacrifice it, go get another land, play Stee, sacrifice Stee. Oh, I'll just now sacrifice, I'll use Harrow and get this, drawing how many cards whilst ramping.
Yeah.
That seems very good to me.
And like the version of the deck I have doesn't have like the fetch lands as such, but it has Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Jund Panorama, the cheaper monetarily.
Myriad
Landscapes together as well.
Which comes in tapped and it gets 2 basics.
That was one time the lands didn't come in tapped and they were different basics. I don't know what I was doing. I clearly couldn't read the card.
Everybody makes that mistake once in a while. It's all right. It's all right.
He's just never gonna let me give it up.
Yeah. So you're using some fetches, the pseudo fetches in there. Yeah. Things like Fabled Passage as well are good ones. Recently printed a second time in the same standard, so a little bit more accessible, a little bit more affordable. Might be a good include, but including lands that sacrifice themselves for other reasons might be good includes. One of my favorite is Cabal Pit, which is an uncommon out of Odyssey, and if you have Threshold, you can pay a black and sacrifice it to give a creature minus, I think it's -2 or -3. So it acts as a land, so uncounterable removal on a land that draws you a card and takes out an opponent's creature.
Or even if you have lands that they don't sacrifice themselves, but can sacrifice other things like High Market, Phyrexian Tower.
Yes.
Well, there's the on the same theme as the deserts that say sacrifice a desert. They could possibly work. I know they have minor effects, but having draw a card on top of that as well.
Or stay with me, Scape Shift.
Yes.
That's a dirty one.
That is dirty. I love it.
It absolutely is, but it's a great way to tutor up any special or specific lands you might have in the deck for
the ball poppers and Urborg and mana for days.
Exactly. Which you said that the land base is on a little bit of a budget, so Cabal coffers might not be in range.
This is my dream, Corvold. Don't understand.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, we've talked about land, we've talked about some of our creatures, we've talked about some of our spells, but you mentioned that the problem was finishing out the game was a bit of the reach. That's why you included the aristocrats in here. I think that in a deck like this, with the value that you can generate from things like treasure tokens or Eldrazi spawns and Eldrazi scions, being able to pop off a good X casting cost spell to end out the game, or even put a dent in everybody's life totals, would be a valid option and alternative to closing out the game, because you've been pressuring people with your dragon for even 2 or 3 turns is enough to be able to drop somebody to the life total where an X spell for 10 would close out the game or finish somebody off.
Torment of Hailfire, Sanguinate.
The one that came to my mind immediately because of the associated synergies is Death Cloud. Because Death Cloud makes everybody, including yourself, sacrifice creatures, sacrifice lands, discard cards, lose life. Because even if you aren't able to finish somebody off with a Death Cloud and you leave them hanging on life support, you've just drawn a mitt full of cards off of Corvold. You're going to be able to finish out the game the next turn or the following turn. And again, even if you pop off Death Cloud for 3, with Corvold and a few sacrifice fodders out, you're drawing 6 cards because you're sacrificing 3 creatures and 3 lands.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. It's kind of like a pseudo board wipe as well. If you can keep Corvold around, and there you go, well, I didn't want to sacrifice my lands, so I'm going to have to be the creatures. They're going to be less able to block him. So that's actually really cool thing to think of.
Yeah, absolutely. And options like that, and like you mentioned, Torment of Hailfire and Exsanguinate are good options there too. And you can also include overrun effects if you do have a lot of the little creatures in there. If you are relying on something like Prosh as a backup win con, making a handful of Kobold tokens, just being able to make your board a little bit bigger is a great way to swing across for value too.
Well, I'll always put a lot of tokens in there, because then you obviously a lot of sacrifice fodder. And there's some card. What is it, Martin? My favorite win condition in green that works really well with a lot of creatures that essentially make your opponent's life totals 10.
Triumph of the Horse.
Fantastic. Yes, it is a classic. And with Triumph of the Hordes, all you need to do is swing in 5 unblocked creatures, even if they start off with 1 power, and you're finishing somebody off with infect damage.
Or even if Prosh is just a 9 power creature, 10 power, fly in. Your mechanic is telling you, Martin, this is what you must do.
So I always advocate talking to regular play groups about including infect in your decks, because it does give a lot of people the feel bads when you take a format where your life total is 40 and suddenly your life total is 10. It's like playing Edgar Markov in a deck, and you're somebody to 10. Always talk to your play group about it before including something like that in your deck, because people sit down expecting a game where you're considering 40-point.
There are certain rules that people follow as etiquette.
So I think that we've got a good shell, and we've got some good adjustments to what you've got. Is there anything else specifically you want to address from your existing list?
There's one card that I think does so much work that doesn't get talked about as much as it should do, and that's Mazarek Cruel Death Priest.
Absolutely.
He puts +1/+1 counters on each of your creatures each time you sacrifice something, or each time a player sacrifices something, I think it is.
Oh, yeah.
And with the whole sacrificing theme that, is lightly touched on there, your stuff gets crazy big very quickly.
Yes.
So I'd say, to me, he's one of the all-star cards of the deck. No one really pays him attention until you do it once and they go, "Whoa, this is crazy."
or until you
that's
play.
not too bad. Sacrifice a fetch land. What do you mean that's power?
Yeah.
or you play him with a Grave Pact out and you sacrifice one creature, and suddenly all of your remaining creatures get 4+1/+1 counters. That gets pretty unreasonable pretty quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't end off talking about a pair of triplets that I include in decks like this, and that is Merciless Executioner, Fleshbag Marauder, and Plague Crafter. Are they already in the deck?
All in my version. That's so good.
That's something I was baffled with for the printed Plague Crafter. I'm like, what do you mean this is better than the previous two? That has an additional toughness. Why?
And lets them either sacrifice a Planeswalker or they have to discard a card.
Yeah.
Why take two creatures that were good enough to print two different variations on and make them even better? Right?
Yeah, it's so crazy.
The power creep is real.
Especially if you have like the old Grave Pacts or Erebos's Dictative Erebos out, and it's you just put 3 mana, sacrifice the thing itself. Everyone sacrifices 2 things and you draw a card. It just seems really overpowering.
That is just all the value in the world. And that makes a player like me salivate a little bit.
Yeah. And there is actually one card that I would like to include that isn't infect based. I know, shocking. But that, Journey to Eternity, because you are sacrificing everything. So if you stick it on a Fleshbag Marauder, then you play your Merciless Executioner, sacrifice that, and all of a sudden you have 5 mana Merciless Executioner every single turn.
Oh, that's the one that's a bit like Merrin, but mana put into it.
Yes, exactly right.
Okay. It flips when the enchanted creature dies and comes back as a land with the activated ability to pull things out of the yard.
Yeah.
It also functions as protection for Corvold, too, giving you 1 free death on Corvold.
Yeah, I like that one. It's a good idea. Yeah. Thanks for telling me this when I made the deck.
I don't think it was out when you made the deck. No, wait, it was Ixalan. My bad.
Still, again, I think that a deck like this, a deck like Corvold, just has so many great synergies and so much value to be obtained from it. The one thing that you want to make sure that your deck does, though, is function without your commander. We did mention that Corvold does get very expensive. If he dies even once, he's up to 7 mana to cast. So make sure that you've got the ability in there to pivot your strategy. You go from an aggro deck with your sacrifice synergies to more of an attrition-based board control deck when Corvold can't be cast or can't come out again regularly. You go more into a control style.
You're like token something as well with other commanders. You've got Prosh, you've got the Sekirah Deathkeeper in there, so you've got tokens that can buffer until you can do things later on.
Yeah. And I've currently got it. I'm not sure whether I like it or not. It's one of those where I look at it and go, one day this will win me the game, but that day has not come yet. And that's oh my gosh, what's it called now? It's when you have so many treasures, you win the game.
The 5 mana black and white, Revel in Riches.
That's it, yeah.
One of my favorite cards ever.
Yeah, it's really cool. I have it, I just go, someday I'll have enough treasures to make this work, but then I always end up sacrificing the treasures to Corvold, so I never get to that point.
It's always a slippery slope. You're always like, I've got 8 treasure tokens, but I can cast this card in my hand. I'll put myself back another 3 treasure tokens in order to do it, and you never make it to 10. But every once in a while, it is so satisfying to have Revel and Riches out, drop a board wipe, and just cross your fingers that it makes it back to your turn. It is the greatest. I love it.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we've got an amazing shell. We've got an amazing little tune-up. I'm going to post the original deck list and the tuned-up deck list in the description below. And we'll see the next time that you play it on cam, how it performs, and if you're satisfied with the little bit of tune-up. All right?
But that's it, yeah. We'll be sure to have yourself back on, so you can see it for yourself for that.
First, hopefully not with a giant flying dragon in my.
I'll be sending it your way, going, you did this.
You're responsible for this. All right, Alex Martin, thank you so much for coming on Let's Do a Brew. I really do appreciate it. Why don't you tell the audience where we can find you, both your channel and your socials?
So we are on, obviously, YouTube as Affinity for Commander. We're on Twitter with our tag is @4Commander. You'll recognize our logo as that.
It'll be
the same one. And I think That's all. I don't think we're not on the Insta.
Yeah.
We're not with the kids.
We're not cool enough for that.
You
Well, we release videos every Wednesday, alternating between gameplay and non-gameplay things. And yeah, we're quite chill back on the Twitter as well. Alex occasionally has funny tweets. Most of the time, he's just, occasionally.
Oh, awesome. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time that we get to play together, and I look forward to one day having you back on the show again, too.
Yeah,
Excellent. Thank you very much for having us.
All right, everybody, let's take a look at the tuned up list. And here's our final list. I've worked to bring the average casting cost down by almost an entire point. Martin's list was a little top heavy. We've added in some protection for Corvold because we don't want him getting removed before we get the value out of him. There's a little bit more interaction in this list, and I've removed some of the higher casting cost aristocrat style effects in order to get the curve down to where we want it and a little bit more efficient. You can see that there is a lot of board advantage generating cards in this list. A lot of cards that give us more permanence whenever we take actions. That's fantastic for Corvold. Additionally, there's now a Scape Shift Field of the Dead line in the deck, which can act as a massive advantage bomb, not only drawing a card for every land that you sacrifice, but now making a zombie for every land that enters the battlefield. That's more fodder to sacrifice, and that's more card advantage. We also have the Death Cloud win con in here too, meaning that we can make either a small Death Cloud, which can refill our hands while setting our opponents back, or we can just make a Death Cloud large enough to finish everybody off. I've also included Triumph of the Hordes for Alex's sake, but it can really be considered a flex spot in the deck. Martin can play whatever he'd like. I'm looking forward to seeing Martin play this list in the future. I wanted to thank Alex and Martin for joining me on the premiere of Season 2 of Let's Do a Brew. I think we did a pretty great live tune-up for Martin's Korvold Fae-Cursed King deck. I hope we get to see some of the changes that he's made to the deck on his videos over on his channel. Go check them out when you've got a chance. If you like our content, remember to subscribe. We do great content every Tuesday and Fridays, and sometimes bonus videos too. Until next time, folks, good luck and have fun.